Is from 1 Kings 20, 39 and 40. Brett said it's kind of hard to understand. So I pulled up my version in the ISV. It seems to be a little better to understand. So 1 Kings 20, 39 and 40. As the king was passing by, he cried out to the king. He is a prophet, said, and told him, "Your servant went out into the middle of the battle, and a soldier turned aside, brought a prisoner to me, and told me, 'Guard this man. If he turns up missing for any reason at all, you'll pay for it with your life, or be fined 1 talent of silver.' While your servant was busy here and there, the prisoner escaped. The king told him, 'By your actions, you've earned the proper judgment.'" That's 1 Kings 20, 39 through 40.
So I don't know about you, but this week has been very, very busy. In fact, everybody I think that I've bumped into was very busy too. And I was thinking, in fact, just before I got up, I'm not sure exactly when it started. I remember being young and having all day long, nothing to do and things like that. And things have just gotten busier. And I was thinking about this recently because I don't know if you use your imagination. There's people in the Bible that you wonder how they would do in our time. And if you were to somehow bring them here, I think we have a lot in common with one person in particular, that if you brought them forward to the 21st century, that they would be fine and fit right in. I think it's Martha. I think if you brought her, because in Matthew 10:41 it says worried and bothered about so many things, I think we could say, "Martha, welcome to the 21st century. You're going to fit right in." And I think about her a lot lately because I don't like it. I don't know if you do. It's kind of nice to be busy and productive and things like that, but I think that's not the way it's supposed to be, where you're just kind of running from your pillow out to the day and back to your pillow, and just kind of flies by, and we're stressed out and busy. I guess they did a poll asking people. I guess 4 out of 5 people, for whatever that's worth, are stressed. They describe their lives as stressed. And there's always been anxiety for one reason or another, but in our case, I think it's a direct result of what we would call progress. We would tell Martha, say, "Yeah, welcome to this world of progress." We were making a lot of progress, and we have all kinds of luxuries that our great-grandparents didn't have. We have cars and smartphones and planes and email and countless time-saving devices. We will use those before the day's over. And we have all these things because we're making progress. And that seems like a good thing. That seems like a very positive word. But there's something unique about our progress. It's kind of different than what it's been like in the past. Our progress is progressing faster than it ever has before. We are getting more and more stuff, and we're doing more and more stuff, and we have reached overload, and not just one kind. There's a bunch of different kinds of overload. I bet some of these will be familiar to you, but our technology is not a bad thing, but it has provided some great things, but there's some side effects along the way. One thing I'm sure you've noticed is information overload. Never before in history has there been so much information accessible for us. One person said the age of information started with the printing press, 1440, and the Bible was printed. You think about it, take a step back. The Bible was printed, first book printed, and then a lot of other books. And though books are powerful, they affect the thinking of the world. People had access to information that their ancestors didn't have, and it changed everything. And ever since then, the amount of information that's being produced has reached an incredible level. First, it was just the Bible, of course, and now other books. I looked it up. I had no idea. 1 million books a year are produced. 1 million books every year are coming out, and that doesn't count websites and blogs and TV shows and Google information, you name it, it's out there. We are drowning in information. And because we have so many facts, they surface as part of our culture in the form of useless statistics. I'll give you a couple of examples. A guy described it this way. It shows up in sports sometimes. Some of you will appreciate this. You'll be watching TV and some guy will say something like, since 1984, the Buffalo Bills have won only 2 games in which they were 4 points ahead with less than 6 minutes to play. And only 17% of the times he has pitched at Shea Stadium has Dwight Gooden struck out the third and fourth hitters less than 3 times when they came to bat with more than 1 runner on base. What do you do with that information? It's been pointed out, there's this thing called the information action ratio, and that's the world was once a place when you got up in the morning and you got some information and you took that information and did something about it. It's called the information action ratio. Now things are different. If I tell you that most oranges come from Brazil or that bananas outsell oranges, what are you going to do with that information? It's just information. How does that affect your plans? Although the Bible was the first book printed, the key information that we need, it's gotten lost in a sea, an ocean of information. And so it takes a lot more effort to focus on the information that matters. You become, after a while, you're just surrounded by everything like that. It's so much useless information, you become passive. And so that's why when somebody's presented with some trivia, like I just did, you say, that's interesting. And then you're presented with the truth. And it's the same response. That's interesting. No response. It's like Elijah. You probably know 1 Kings 18, verse 21. I'll just give you one snippet of what was going on that day at Mount Carmel. And remember, he was kind of confronting them with the truth. In 1 Kings 18, 21, he says, it's time to make a decision. But notice their response here. It's a lot like ours sometimes. 1 Kings 18, verse 21, Elijah came near to all the people and said, how long will you hesitate between 2 opinions? If the Lord is God, follow him, but if Baal, follow him. But notice it says, but the people did not answer him a word. It's the worst possible reaction. No reaction. We're confronted with the truth to say that is a very good point, but no real response. That can happen a lot when we go to church. Somebody like me gets up and says something, we nod our heads and say, yeah, that's a great point. And that's the end of it. We have information overload. We have people overload. Being around people, of course, is a good thing. It's vital for a Christian to be around other Christians. But in our culture, we're connected to everyone. And this muffles a lot of the true connections. My parents' generation, all the neighbors knew each other. They even came out and played games. The adults did too. And in most cases today, we don't even know our neighbors' names. And that kind of distance makes it hard to obey Philippians 2:4. Let each of you look not only to his own interest, but also the interest of others. I think you need to know their name for that to happen. We're surrounded by people, but we see them mostly as obstacles. I think I was talking about that. That happened to me earlier this week. It just seemed like everybody was in my way. They're just strangers who irritate us. And Facebook, of course, gives you 1,000 friends and has changed the definition of friend. In our culture, everybody's a friend, and at the same time, nobody is. I shared with you not long before, I picked up some friends from Scotland years ago, and it was their first time in the United States. We went straight to King Soopers. They're going to pick up some stuff, and we walked in, and they started laughing, not to mock things, but they saw the aisle devoted to cereal, and they had never seen that before, and I had never considered it before, but it was kind of odd, a whole aisle for cereal. I guess at some point, 186 different choices of cereal. They were used to stores where you maybe had a couple of choices. We have information overload, people overload, choice overload. When I was growing up, there was 3 channels, 4 if you were really bored and watch PBS. And at the end of the day, some of you may not know this, at the end of the day, you know what the channels did? They ended. They signed off. Not today. There's thousands of channels 24/7. Remember, even this phrase is outdated. Saturday morning cartoons? No, it's not Saturday morning cartoons. There's channels just devoted to cartoons 24 hours a day. We have channels devoted to food and sports and music, Discovery Channel, Weather Channel, History Channel. I keep pushing for the idea of maybe one devoted to grammar. You could call it the English Channel, but maybe not. But we have a lot of choices, and that might be, I think part of it's because we're really blessed, but we're also kind of spoiled, and we think of the whole world as a buffet, and then we bring that kind of thinking into Christianity, and we go church shopping to find the truth, not to find the truth, but to find what we like. Instead of looking for places where we can serve, We treat them like community centers sometimes. And then we're confronted with Ephesians 4 that says that there's one body. And the idea that there's only one church is very offensive to our buffet mentality. You mean I only get one choice? Information overload, people overload, choice overload. And we also have just too much stuff. We have more stuff per person than any other nation in history. We have closets that are full, storage units that are full. Did you know that garages were designed for cars? Did you know that? It's true. And our possessions take over our houses and fill up our time. It's like an invasion. You've probably heard of the show Buried Alive, and it's an extreme of hoarding, but it shows how stuff interferes with life. Everything we own, as one guy put it, owns us. We have to maintain it, paint it, arrange space for it, and then work to pay for it. And the side effect is that we're not as grateful. We just kind of take it for granted, all the stuff that we have. It always stuck with me. There was this guy who was talking about visiting another country that is not as well off as ours. And this guy had very little, and he was a brother in Christ, and they were sitting down to pray, and this man led the prayer. And he said, "Thank you for my chairs, my table, my spoon." He was very specific because there wasn't much. Hey, how would you feel about thanking God for any of those things? Because we just take it for granted. Deuteronomy 28:47, God calls them on one particular thing. He says, "You did not serve the Lord your God joyfully and gladly in the time of prosperity." See, when things get good and we have too much stuff and we're too busy, we know that's when our relationship with God suffers. We live in a time of prosperity, and when you have a lot of stuff, there's a tendency to drift away from God. We have schedule overload. We're so very busy, and it's so bad that we have invented something we call multitasking, as if it's a talent. Multitasking is a myth. We can talk about that in more detail later. Thinking that you're doing 2 or 3 things at the same time is really doing 2 or 3 things badly. Your brain is not designed for it. We rush from one activity to the next, and it takes away from the fun of the anticipation. We've forgotten how to look forward to things because we're so busy dealing with the busyness of now. We can't look forward to anything. We're dealing with right now. And it takes away the happiness of reminiscing. There's no chance to think about what you once did because you're so busy moving on to the next thing. There's no time to catch your breath and truly experience anything. We have more commitments than time and too many responsibilities. This is a quote. I don't know who said this, but it kind of hit me. For many people, the barrier to spiritual growth is not lack of commitment, but overcommitment to the wrong things. So the reason I asked Scott to read that very obscure verse is because it's what happened is God sent a prophet to King Ahab. It's in 1 Kings 20. And it was one of those kind of object lesson stories to kind of get his attention. And it's about a guy who's supposed to be guarding somebody. It says, "You're responsible. Do not let this guy get away." And in 1 Kings 20, verse 39 in this story, here's what happens. "And as the king passed, he cried to the king and said, 'Your servant went out into the midst of the battle, and behold, a soldier turned and brought a man to me and said, Guard this man. If by any means he is missing, your life shall be for his life, or else you shall pay a talent of silver.'" So the stakes are high. Do not let this guy get away. But what caught my eye is what he says and why he got away. "And as your servant was busy here and there, he was gone." I thought, that's what I'm doing. I'm busy here, I'm busy there, and the important stuff is slipping through my fingers. And that's part of the point that he's trying to get across to him is we fail to do the right thing because we're busy. So all this overload has serious side effects, and one of the worst side effects as we move faster and faster and do more and more, it keeps you from your true purpose. We know Matthew 22 is one part where it says, "You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, and with all your soul, and with all your mind." And it says that you shall love your neighbor as yourself. God said these are the things that really matter. But all this overload interferes with putting God first, and it interferes with helping other people, and there's no more room. No breathing room for the unexpected, what you didn't plan. But God's really good at working with the unexpected things. And see, if it's not on our schedule, we don't even see it. And it's easy to think that your life's going to stay the same. But unless you and I make some real changes, it's not going to stay the same. In fact, I already noticed it's being more and more and faster and faster. You remember the old thing of spinning plates? So you remember the old thing where the guy's spinning a plate on top of a pole, and the trick was to see how many you could keep going? You can only do so many before things start falling and breaking. I guess there's a Japanese word for busy. I don't know how to say it. But the symbol for it, for busy, is a heart with a line crossed through it. No heart. So the solution to all this, I hate it when people say, here's the problem, and walk away. So I'm going to give you the solution. It's actually very easy. But it's hard to do. If you're overloaded, you have to unload. But we're a lot like that young man, remember, who came up to Jesus and he said, what good thing must I do? Remember, it's in Luke 18. And he says, well, have you done this? And he says, yeah. He says, okay, here's what you got to do. It's very simple. Get rid of everything and come follow me. And he says, the solution is get rid of your stuff. And this young man says, well, no, I'm going to keep doing it my way. Well, our situation is kind of worse. In a way, Jesus, of course, does ask us to surrender everything over to him. But in a way, he's saying, okay, how about just give up some of it? How about tone down your schedule, give up some of your stuff, set aside some things that you think are so important. In a way, we're worse because he's asking us just to give up some of it. And we're still like that guy and say, no, I think I'll keep doing it my way. But I think losing something might be easier if you realize what you might gain. What if I told you that this might be the first step towards peace of mind, or lack of stress, or more time with things that matter and better relationships? What would you give for those things? Or maybe the better question is what would you get rid of to have all that? So here in the 21st century, it looks like we're making progress. All the stuff we have, all the things we're doing, and it seems like progress until you look up the definition. And I did, and I was kind of startled. It's forward or onward movement toward a destination. So I don't think we have that. We have movement, but in most cases we don't have a destination. We just hurtle through the day just so we can make it to the next day, so we can hurtle through that day too. No real ending in mind. My cousin Tim, they used to live in Glenwood Springs. Some of you have met Jack and Kenny. This is their older brother Tim, and he and some other young guys, when they were about 12, found a tricycle. They were too old for tricycles, but they found a new use. And they lived on the slopes of Glenwood Springs. If you've been through there, you've seen some of the houses that kind of follow the foothills there. And just to make a long story short, they would get on the back of the tricycle, stand on that back platform, and then just ride it down the hill. But the end was pretty significant. What they would do is they would steer it over to this guy's lawn and then bail out, and that's how you survive the trip. And my cousin Tim thought that was a pretty good idea. And so he went down as well, and you probably know the end of the story. He was going down. He did not make it to the lawn. The handlebars twisted, and he hit the air. And that was fun for a brief moment of time until gravity took over, and it did not end well. He had speed, he had distance, but you know what the problem was? Is his destination was unclear. He was going faster and faster, and he was going, and it was exciting, and it was a thrill to be alive, but there was no exit plan, no solid goal. And because of that, things did not go well for him. The trip did not end well. True progress has a goal. So I think that might be the key for us as Christians is when we get up in the morning, I know there's responsibilities hovering over you, but maybe to just regroup and say, okay, but what is my goal? Not for the end of my life, but for the end of the day. What do I hope to accomplish? Just to keep this plate spinning? Or am I really going to do the things that God wants me to do? So when you get up tomorrow, it might be a good idea to just stop. I think that would be the secret for me. Just stop before you jump into the schedule and take 5 minutes just to make sure your head's clear, because chances are you're going to forget everything I've just said, and I am too. But maybe tomorrow we can take 5 minutes to remember some of this and make sure the overload isn't drowning out the things that matter. God has a bunch of wonderful things in mind for you, and I don't want to miss them. And I don't want you to miss them either. I hope this is encouraging to you while you stand together and sing.